Bismillahirrahmanirrahim and Assalamu alaikum to all students. The course is morphology. The topic is modification of stem. Now, first of all, we should know that a stem can be modified into several type of forms to perform several type of specific functions. While the primary function of a stem is mechanical support and transport of water and minerals, it can also perform other type of functions. This type of function may be storage or protection, or by any other means, any other function can be performed by the stem. To perform those specific function, a stem must get modified into a specific shape. Now there are three forms of stem basically, and those three forms can further be modified into other forms. A stem may be underground, a stem may be subaerial, or a stem may be an aerial type of stem. An underground stem is completely below the surface. A subaerial stem is partly above the surface, partly below the surface, while an aerial stem is completely above the surface and grows erect. Then these three forms can be modified into several types: rhizome, tuber. Subaerial can be modified into runner, stolon. Aerial stem can be modified into tendril, thorn, and so on. Going to the next slide. First of all, we shall discuss about these underground modification. An underground stem is possessed by herbaceous plants. In many herbaceous plants, stem develop below the soil and is called underground. Such type of stem that is present below the surface of the soil is known as an underground stem, and specifically herbaceous plants are those plants that possess such type of stem. Why the stem is below the surface? Because it remains dormant below the surface during unfavorable conditions. Question arises, what are those unfavorable conditions? An unfavorable condition is such a condition that does not allow a plant to grow or reproduce properly, such as high temperature or moisture and so on. The major function of these underground stem is what? To store food. By doing so, by the storage of food, they become what? Fleshy. They become fleshy. And they can also perform the function of delineation and vegetative propagation. Simply means vegetative propagation simply means the reproduction through vegetative methods. They can be differentiated from roots by these structure. I mean, if you want to differentiate between a stem and a root, because both of these are present below the surface, so you must look closely to these structures, especially the position of nodes and internodes. The nodes and internode indicate that this underground part of this plant is actually a stem. If nodes and internodes are absent, then that will be a root. Occurrence of leaves also indicates that these underground parts are actually stem, and absence of root cap is also a characteristic of an underground stem. The first type of an underground modification of a stem is rhizome. A rhizome is a special type of underground stem. It is prostrate, dorsiventral. Dorsiventral means it is flat, just like your hand, and brownish in color. It grows horizontally under the soil surface, and it shows distinction, clear nodes and internodes. I will discuss all these things in the diagram as it possesses a terminal bud and also axillary bud. The position of these buds is also a characteristic feature of a stem. And scale leaves. Rhizome remain dormant under the soil, and at the onset of favorable condition, the terminal bud grows into the aerial shoot, and which dies at the end of the season. Now by all of this, I simply means that a rhizome is a special type of stem. This stem is dorsiventrally flat, like a leaf, like your hand. It is brownish in color, and its growth is horizontal. Horizontal means just like this line. Vertical means straight upward, and in this case it is not straight, it is horizontal like this. We know that it is stem because it possesses nodes and internodes and axillary buds. By this third sentence, I mean that the rhizome remains dormant. Dormant means in sleeping condition under the soil. And when favorable conditions are back, for example, when temperature is suitable, when moisture is suitable, this rhizome gave off a terminal bud. As you can see here, this is a terminal bud. The one that is growing above the soil, suppose this one is the surface of the soil. Below surface of the soil is this part. I am mentioning this as rhizome. You can see that it is growing horizontally in this direction. It has these brown color leaves and this green color bud, and this bud is known as the terminal bud, and which give off leaves. Look closely and you can see that this is a clear example of ginger. Other examples of rhizome are turmeric. It also resembles this type of stem. So ginger, botanical name of ginger is Zingiber officinale, and turmeric, botanical name I have also written here, Curcuma domestica, and also canna, and other type of examples are present. Now all of these plants, they are actually rhizome. Now the second type of underground modification of a stem is called a tuber. A tuber is a special type of stem. It is not like a normal stem. A normal stem grows erectly above the soil. It possesses green leaves, but the tuber is different type of special type of stem. It is special swollen underground branch of the plant, and it becomes swollen. Why? Because of the storage of food, and the storage is in the form of carbohydrate. Think upon this for 1 second and also look at this diagram. What do you see it is? Yes, it is a potato. A potato is actually an underground stem, and we call it, or we name it, or we have a special term for it in botanical language, and that is a tuber. Now the question is, why have we named this tuber or the potato a stem? Because the potato bears nodes and internodes. Look at here, also here and here, you can clearly see these dots, and these dots are actually telling us that these are the nodal parts of this underground branch. Upon these nodal parts, what you can see, yes, there are eyes of the potato, and these are actually buds of the potato. From these parts, an aerial shoot can arise which can grow above the surface of the soil. Now the third type of an underground modification of the stem, and that is known as a bulb. Before moving further, you can see the diagram and you can understand what are we going to discuss further. It is the diagram of an onion, and this one is a diagram of garlic. A bulb is basically not truly stem, instead it is actually an underground bud. It is a condensed disc-like underground stem, and it does not store food material. The upper surface of this stem is conical, cone-like, you can see here, this is cone-like, and bears an apical bud. This here part, it is, you can see that it is a short stem, reduced stem. This stem will give off roots from here. You may have clearly seen this when you buy onions from the market. It have roots on this lower part. This part is also known as the stem. The stem is very condensed, very sharp. The upper part from this region here, you can see, this is an apical bud, and the property of apical bud that it will possess leaves. These leaves actually do what? Store food, become thick and fleshy, and the outer few leaves remain dry. and protective. Those leaves that we remove before cooking an onion are actually dry. Those are also leaves, but they are dry and protective in function. The inner part that we actually eat or cook, those are actually modified leaves. The third type of underground stem is known as corm. Now the corm is short and fleshy and straight upright means vertical, thickened underground stem. It bears many buds as you can see in this diagram and brownish scale leaves. This all part of this here. These are actually what? These are actually scale leaves. Scale leaves are those leaves that are very thin and paper-like and it covers the surface of the stem. Those are known as the scale leaves. A common example of a corm is cloacacia. The second type of stem is aerial stem and they are modified. We name it as aerial modifications of the stem. Now the aerial stem is completely above the surface of the soil. The question arises, what forms can be an aerial stem modified? So the first type of this aerial modification is stem tendril, or you can simply name it as tendrils. What are tendrils? Tendrils are thin and wiry structures. They are actually modified buds and they are sensitive structures. With the help of these tendrils, the plant can climb a supporting object. They can climb on a structure if they have a weak type of stem. If the stem is unable to grow straight upward, they are helped by these thin and wiry tendril structures to attach to a support and climb over it. The property of these tendrils is that they are leafless, they do not possess leaves. You can clearly see here, this one is a tendril, this one is also a tendril. What is it? It is thin and it is wiry and it is helping a plant to climb over this supporting wire or branch or wall or any other supporting object. The common example of tendril possessing flower are plants are Passiflora. Vitus also possess these tendrils. What is Vitus? Vitus vinifera is the botanical name of grapes, angur, cucurbita family, watermelon, cucumber. If some of you students have ever seen Vitus grape plant, cucurbita, a cucumber or watermelon plant, or Passiflora, you may have observed that all of these have a weak stem. The stem is thin, the stem is unable to grow straight, so they possess these wiry structures. With the help of these structures, they grow straight upward. Now the second type of aerial modification is thorn. What is a thorn? Many of you may know that thorn is a pointed structure like a needle, also known in other words as prickle. But the prickle and thorn and spine, they are different in nature from one another. Properly, a thorn is hard and pointed structure and it is present on many plants. But it is actually in nature an auxiliary bud which have been modified into this pointed structure. If it is a bud, we cannot call it a root, a leaf, or some other part. We can properly call it a stem. That is why a thorn is a modification of a stem. The thorn is also leafless. It never possesses leaves. It never possesses branches or flowers. The thorn may possess leaves above its point of origin, branches above its point of origin, or flower in the near regions. But upon this thorn structure, if a thorn is present here, it will be present straight like this and will not possess leaves around here. The function of the thorn is what? Protection. Like in the previous slide you have seen, the function of the tendril was to provide support to the weak plant. The function of the thorn is to provide protection against browsing animal. A browsing animal is an animal that feeds upon the plants. For example, citrus. Citrus is the family name of orange, lemon, etc. Bougainvillea, that is an ornamental plant, Bougainvillea. It has attractive leaves. It also possesses thorns. And Carissa are other examples of this thorn. So now you know that a thorn is actually modified structure. It is modified from axillary bud, and we call it an aerial modification of the stem. Now going to the next slide. Another type of aerial modification is known as Philoplant. You can clearly see in this diagram, this is a plant of opuntia and cactus. A special type of phyloplant or cladode is a stem which gets transformed into a leaf-like structure. This is green and flattened with the nodes and internodes. The points on which you can see the thorns are arising, these points are actually these nodes and internodal parts. And the stem is becoming green and also becoming fleshy. Why is it becoming fleshy? Because such type of stem is present in xerophytic plants. A xerophytic plant is a plant that grows in dry condition where there is shortage of water. And the leaves in these plants get modified into spine-like structure. The question arises, why would a leaf want to get modified into a spine-like structure? Because to reduce the loss of water during transpiration. Why? Because these plants are already growing in dry conditions, so there is shortage of water, so the leaf gets modified into spine to reduce the rate of transpiration and the loss of water. The stem gets modified into leaf-like structure. The stem performs the function of photosynthesis. The stem also performs the function of storage of water, H2O. That is why this type of stem has been modified into this special type of phyloplant. Now going to the next slide. Modified orbital bills, they are not so much important, but you can study it and remember some important points about this type of stem. So the third form of the stem, that is a subaerial stem. Now a subaerial stem is not completely above the surface. It is not completely below the surface. It is partly above the soil and partly below the soil. That is why it is known as the subaerial modification of the stem. The first point, the first form is a runner. रनर में हम एग्जांपल ले सकते हैं घास की, यानी ग्रीन हॉरिजॉन्टल प्रोस्ट्रेट ब्रांच. कौन सी चीज़ आपके माइंड में आती है? यस, ग्रास. ग्रास कम्स टू आवर माइंड व्हेन वी think about a horizontal branch running in all directions. Many runners arise from a single point. You can see from this single point, a runner here, a runner in this direction, in this, and in all directions. This is the nodal portion, and it possesses a straight branch. On this straight branch, you can see several leaves are present. They are known as scale leaves. Each runner has one or more nodes, and the node bears scale leaves. I have explained here. The common example is lawn grass in basic that. Moving to the next slide. The second type of subaerial modification is stolon. Now what is a stolon? A stolon is a branch that arises from the base of the main stem. Suppose this is a main stem. A branch is arising from this part and going straight above the soil. Initially grows upward like an ordinary branch, like a simple branch, but after some time it bends down. It is bending down, you can see, and touches the soil and the surface. Where this terminal bud gave rise to the new shoot. Where it touches the soil, it gave rise to another branch. A branch will also arise from this point and grow straight, then bend down, and then will touch the soil and give roots and an aerial branch in all directions. This type of special type of subaerial modification is known as stolon, and the example is jasmine, chambeli, strawberry, and colocasia. Another subaerial modification is known as the offset. There is no difference between a runner and the offset, except one, that an offset is aquatic plant. The runner, grass, is a terrestrial plant, and the length of a runner is a more lengthier, while the offset is only single. It gives off a single node, it gives off a single shoot, and that's it. The sucker is also an example of subaerial modification, and The mint or pudina is a perfect example of the sucker. The sucker is also runner-like, but what happens is that in sucker, the branch initially grows below the soil. As you can see in this diagram, this horizontal branch is growing below the soil for some time and then slowly and gradually comes out of the soil and then gives leaves and branches. As you can also see in this other diagram, this branch is arising from the stem, growing under the soil for some time and then coming out of the soil and giving off these leaves. It grows horizontally below the soil for some distance and then comes out of the soil and produces green leaves. A perfect example of this sucker is mint, I have said earlier, pudina and chrysanthemum. So students, that was all for today. The topic was the modification of the stem. We have properly discussed three types of the forms of the stem or modification of the stem. Those three forms are underground, subaerial and aerial. In underground, we have seen what a rhizome looks like, what a tuber looks like. In subaerial, we have seen a runner, that is grass, stolon, that is jasmine, offset and sucker. In aerial, we have seen a tendril modified for the function of climbing, thorn modified for the function of protection, philoplant, cladode and others.